Hey everybody, Tony D with a Screenwriter's Take, and I'm talking about a Netflix movie called It Comes at Night. First, the non-spoiler review. Um, in my view, the movie although it's well produced, well acted, the screenplay doesn't quite live up to the rest of the production in my view. The story is sort of sad and depressing. I can see kind of what they're trying to do. But what was really missing from the story, in my view, was a transformation of character. We didn't see that. We didn't really see that. The characters are basically kind of the same mentally from beginning to end. And that transformation really needed to happen. I have some ideas on how to fix it. It's also a little bit of a slow movie. You can understand it's kind of a drama. And I think the movie drops the ball on certain details and opportunities, which I'll get into in the more detailed review. All right, that concludes. So if I had to give it a number, 1 to 10, I'd probably give it like a 3 or a 4. I mean, I sat through it, but I wasn't super satisfied with the end. I mean, it feels like a play, like it could have been a play because it's basically all takes place in a house and right outside the house. So, maybe as a play it would have worked better. But I think if it had been a play first, you probably would have drilled down into the characters more. And I think that's what this movie was lacking. It was lacking, really vibrant characters. Okay, so that concludes the non-spoiler review. Here's the spoilers. So the first act of It Comes at Night starts out very strong. You got a family of 4, grandfather, father, mother, and teenage son. The grandfather is dying of the disease. It's sort of a future dystopian kind of thing, like a pandemic. Now, as a fan of all things zombie, I was kind of hoping there'd be some zombie stuff in here. I wasn't really sure, or if it was going to be very sort of light zombie kind of movie. It's not that. That I could tell. So they sort of tease you with that possibility because the first shot of the grandfather, he's got kind of these round marks on his face, which could be bites, I thought, but it was kind of hard to tell. And then he's dying, so the father and the teenage son take him out into the woods. He's just about dead, and they finish him off, bury him, and burn his body, or they burn his body and bury him. So it sets up a very grim reality where it's like, if you get sick, you're done. And they're super paranoid about, keeping free of the disease. So that night, someone tries to break into the house. The father captures him. And it's another guy who has a family who's broke into the house because he thought it was abandoned. And then he talks to him, and eventually they find that out. And they decide, well, it might be better to bring his family to their house because first off he has a family, but they're more into the fact he has goats and chickens, and the first family has water but no food, and they have food but no water, which doesn't really work. This is the first sort of minor red flag. That kind of doesn't work in the setting they're in. They're in a very temperate setting. It would be pretty easy to set up rainwater traps and get some water in a temperate environment like that. There has to be a stream somewhere. Has to be. They're out in the middle of the woods. There's got to be sources of water somewhere. So the fact that this guy is like out of water and was looking for water kind of doesn't scan. Now you could say, well, there's not enough water. Okay. There would have been a way to work with it, but you can kind of gloss over that. It's not the real major part of the movie. So, beginning of the second act, the other family comes, and there's a bit of a happy time. The first father is very much in control of the situation. He sets the ground rules, and the other father's kind of deferring to him because he broke into their house, and they're kind of doing him a favor. But he has a wife and a 5-year-old son. at first everybody gets along and it's great, and the teenage son becomes friends with the other father, and they're a little bit closer to his age, I guess, and so he's kind of attracted to the other mother. And all throughout the movie, the teenage son is having nightmares. First, he has nightmares about his grandfather, like being like a zombie, which made me hopeful. Then he has a dark dream about the other mother coming to his bedroom and, seducing him and then spitting blood all over him. Some pretty gruesome, dark dreams. But those dreams don't really pay off. Not really. Kind of in a very sort of basic sense they do, because and again, this is spoilers. By the end of the movie, he gets infected and dies too, so you could say, well, that's foreshadowing of his death. Yeah, I guess that's a pretty ham-fisted way to do it, but sure. So anyhow, the movie progresses, and the big event in the movie is the teenage boy has a dog, an old dog, and he gets away from the group while they're out chopping wood. And he runs into the woods, and you hear him barking, 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 and then you hear the barking stop. Okay? It's daytime, and they don't go, and they got guns, and they don't go investigate what happened to the dog. Now, the implication there, I was like, okay, now we're going to finally see a monster, because they must be afraid of an actual monster that's spreading a disease, I figured. Like something like a werewolf or vampire or, something just zombie related. I figured, okay, now we're finally going to see this thing, or very soon. So instead, they decide, okay, let's just go inside the house and forget about the dog. And then the father, yells at the son and for running off after the dog, and then says, I'm here to protect you, whatever. So tomorrow we'll go search for your dog, which the boy the teenage boy clearly loves the dog. It's his only friend. So that night, the teenage boy, and this was established in the movie, since he's having these dreams, he keeps getting up and wandering around the house and listening to people because he has nothing to do. So he gets up and he finds the 5-year-old boy out of bed and all groggy, right? It's like, oh, you got out of your bed. Let me take you back to your bedroom. He takes him back to his parents, and they're all sleeping in the bed because he's 5, right? So he takes him back, and then he hears a noise. He goes downstairs. The door's open, and he hears thumping. And he doesn't look, but he freaks out and calls his dad. So they come down there. They find the dog severely injured. And then they the two fathers take the dog out, finish the dog off, because there's no saving the dog, unfortunately. Very sad scene. And they burn the dog's body too. Then they have the family meeting to try to figure out what the hell happened, right? So then the teenage boy reveals, well, Andrew was out of his bed and I brought him back. And then they're like, well, how did the door get open? So the conclusion is it must have been opened by the 5-year-old kid. So now they're worried that the 5-year-old kid was exposed to the disease. So they decide to separate within the house for a few days, just in case. And the teenager's still creeping around the house at night. He can't sleep. So he overhears the other family, and the 5-year-old boy is clearly sick. Or he's crying like he's sick. But the problem with this whole setup is he's 5. So he could be crying for no reason whatsoever. None. Secondly, when the teenager goes back to his family and says, oh my God, it sounds like Andrew is sick, their immediate response of the original 2 parents is, okay, we got to kill these people. Which seems to jump the gun a bit, because the setup is this thing is so deadly, and they're worried about the teenage son too, who took the kid by the hand, and so he's like, well, I'm probably infected too, which he is, and that makes sense because this is apparently an incredibly uh, rampant disease. And there's a shot of the bubonic plague painting from the Renaissance in the house. For some reason, it's there. Like everybody has that painting or something. But so this disease is so bad and so contagious that if this little kid had it, they've already been in the same room with this kid, right? So if this was the beer virus, they'd all probably have it. Probably. I mean, there's a good shot. And I get the father's, oh, well, we'll separate. But really, you would have had to separate each individual. And obviously, you can't separate from the 5-year-old. He needs too much guidance. So now they're in this situation where the first set of parents wants to kill the entire other family. Now they go to confront them about Andrew being sick, the kid, the little 5-year-old, and they're there with guns. But of course, like, the other father's ready, and he's got an extra gun that they somehow missed. He holds them hostage, and then they're just saying, like, well, let us go. But the logic of the movie says that the parents decide we can't let them go because they know where we are. But there's a hole in that logic. If the boy is infected, he's going to die. The mother's going to die because she isn't leaving her 5-year-old. So it's likely she's going to die, and it's likely the father's going to die too. So at the very least, the boy's going to die. And they're worried, like, well, they'll come back and kill us. That seems highly unlikely if you just let them go, right? If you let them go back to wherever they were to wait out the death of their 5-year-old and figure out what they're going to do and see if they survive, they'd be lucky if, like, the father survives. It's probably just going to be, and it's probably too late for their own son. But we have this big dramatic scene where they're basically carting the other family out in the woods to kill them all and just execute them, which to me makes little sense. It seems a bit contrived. On top of the fact that we don't even know how the dog died, how it got infected. I guess you assume it's an animal. You assume it's like a coyote or something. So the entire setup of this feels forced. And so they end up in a struggle with the family where they end up just killing all 3 of them, which is pretty brutal. So then they go back home, and of course, a day, the son is throwing up, and then a day later, he's like dying. And then he dies. And then the last shot of the movie is the original 2 parents just sort of sitting at the table with each other. Which really, if the movie was consistent, and they didn't have masks on to watch him die. They had masks on to watch the grandfather die, but not to watch their own kid. So logic would dictate that at least the mother was infected, probably both of them at this point, because they were cooped up together, and it just, the movie's not consistent with the disease in my view. And there wasn't a transformation. A better ending to this movie would have been the following: that at some point the little boy gets infected, and they say, well, listen, you can't stay here. You're all contaminated. You have to leave. And they say, okay, we'll leave, but you got to give us some food and water so we can survive. And then the father goes, we can't. That's wasted on you. You're all going to die. And then there's a fight over the resources. See, that would make a little bit of sense. And it would have made more sense that the father had the compassion, had a little bit of compassion, or the mother, one of the parents, and that the son, who initially had all this compassion, because of events that happened in the movie, let's say his dog is infected, and he's forced to kill him, right? Maybe the dog starts barking at him and foaming at the mouth or whatever. He's forced to kill his own dog, and that transforms him. that makes him the killer. Even it's a hard world already, but now the kid's become hardened. At first he wasn't. Now after killing his own dog, that's it. He's done. So they're out in the woods, and they get into an argument over the food, and they eventually resolve it, right? Father goes, okay, look, I'll give you a couple of chickens, we'll give you some food and water, and you guys stay away from here until you resolve things with your son, and then you come back. Whoever survives. But you can't come back here unless you're disease-free. Or you can't come back at all. Right? And they make that pact. They say, okay. And they start walking away. And then, blam! And the father just falls dead. And the mother's screaming. And the other father's like, what the hell's happening? And he turns around, he sees his son has the rifle. And blam! He kills the mother. And blam, he kills the kid. And the father's screaming at him, what have you done? What have you done? And then the son is like, I had to. They're sick, and they're going to come back here, and they could be sick, and they know where we are, right? So it's a transformation of the son going from a nice guy to cold-blooded killer. And then, for whatever reason, say because the father was a little too nice, maybe the father's the one who discovers the 5-year-old and puts him away. Then the father is the one who gets sick. And then the last shot of the movie is what was the first shot, which was or an early shot. He's using a wheelbarrow. This is what they did in the beginning to move the grandfather out to what will be his grave. So he's now doing it to the father. Father's dying, and now the son has taken over, and he has to kill his own father, just like the father killed the grandfather. And the dying father's sort of looking up at him. He knows his fate, and the son kills him, and this is the final transformation. And it would be symbolic, too, the son killing the father. And then he pushes him over the grave and burns him, and that's the end of the movie. That, to me, would have been a stronger message, because we would have seen the transformation of the teenage boy who was ostensibly a normal kid, but the circumstances of the movie change him. The circumstances of killing his dog finally pushes him over to the edge. His father's already been doing stuff. There's a scene where his father has to take out 2 guys who try to kill him. So, you would want to make the father a nicer guy in this circumstances, a little too nice. And he's the one who opens the door for this other family to come in, but that turns out to be a mistake. And the son realizes, I'm going to have to kill these people. And he just makes the decision for his parents to protect them. And rather than the son dying, the father dies. And, the mother's just like in shock, perhaps waiting to see if she has any signs of the disease. And then maybe the end of the movie is, you have to stay away from me for a couple of days. We have to see if you have this disease. And they've essentially transformed their son into what they were in the beginning, that they were super paranoid. And that transformation would be the crux of the movie. Unfortunately, that was missing from the movie. So, good try on a low-budget thing. Also felt we needed more details of the characters, who they were, beyond one scene of a little exposition. And, again, well acted, well produced. Everything was good about it. I just think the screenplay was a little weak. Didn't have the payoffs we needed. And that's how I would fix it. Okay. So it's on Netflix if you want to check it out. I mean, if you already have Netflix, it's not going to cost you any more. So we'll see you next time.